My name is Lucy Wright. I'm 31, and I've always been the one who shows up, fixes things, and quietly absorbs the chaos my family leaves in its wake. While my older sister Sophie shone under the spotlight and my younger brother Nate found every loophole in life's rules, I became the invisible default, the background hum nobody noticed until it stopped. I live in a modest apartment with a stubborn radiator that hisses like a cat and a kettle that whistles sharper than my family ever has. I like my routines precise. My birthday cake arrives on time. My bills are paid. I help quietly, efficiently, because family is supposed to be a transaction in good faith, and I've been paying that ledger for decades. Growing up, Sophie was always the golden child. A perfect test score earned ice cream and praise. When I succeeded at the same thing, the acknowledgement was a shrug, a not so hard, right? If Sophie wanted a $200 dance costume, Dad called it an investment. If I asked for $40 for a debate trip, it was extra. I learned early, love costs more than money, but somehow I was always the one paying. And I didn't resent it. I told myself I was practical, mature, the adult in every room. I tracked every number because numbers don't lie mid-sentence. I memorized lease agreements, reconciled funds, and stopped loaning money I couldn't afford to lose. Yet, I still went to every birthday, barbecue, and weekend emergency. I held babies, drove through rain to fix blown tires, lifted boxes while Dad supervised. I became a constant in a revolving household of needs. 2 Sundays ago, it all came to a head. Mom's group chat lit up at 9:10 a.m. "Dress nicely tonight. Something special," she typed, carrot emojis punctuating the command. I ignored the tone and packed a bottle of wine, some pretzel buns, Dad's favorites. I ironed a shirt I reserved for presentations and rehearsed phrases that might shield me from the familiar sting of judgment. I can do this. Just show up, eat, leave. At 6:30 p.m., we sat down to dinner. Mom's roast chicken, Dad on his third glass of wine, Nate chattering about his new gym, Sophie arriving 15 minutes late in a white jumpsuit that practically screamed, "Look at me." She leaned in, kissing the air near my cheek. "You look tired, Lucy." I smiled politely. "I work," I said. She rolled her eyes like I'd made a joke. Small talk folded over the table, thin and careful. Then Mom clapped. "We have a special surprise." Her voice was sharp with excitement, the kind that sets teeth on edge. Dad stepped forward, holding a glossy gift bag, ribbon taut, gold tissue paper spilling like a scene from a commercial. "For you," he said. "For me?" My stomach tightened. Sophie grinned like a cat ready to pounce. Nate lifted his phone. Mom pressed, "Open it. This is going to be so helpful for everyone." I untied the ribbon and opened the bag. Inside was a velvet box, flat, heavy, official. My pulse jumped. I lifted the lid. There it was, a family education contribution agreement. Stiff cream paper, little blue adhesive flags like a lawyer sneezed on it. $100,000. 2 children. Private school. I froze. Dad's voice was gentle, almost condescending, as if explaining a seatbelt to a toddler. "We put it in writing so there's no confusion." The room tilted. Silence fell, heavy, punctuated only by a clock ticking and Sophie's twins giggling in an old video on her phone. Mom leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Go on," she said. "Read it." I didn't. I was staring at the word family on the page like it might bite. The triggers slid in one after another. The gas money never returned, the small loans that became permanent debt, the assumption that my savings were the family's. I was always paying. Sophie's laughter, Mom's approval, Dad's quiet judgment, all haunted the edges of my mind. I felt the old reflex to justify, to explain, to account for every penny. But something inside me hardened. Not this time. "No," I said. The word hung in the air, foreign yet firm. Dad's face contorted, negotiating. Sophie's expression shifted from surprise to outrage. Wine flew, a splash across my cheek, my shirt, the tablecloth. Mom screamed, "Get out!" I did, quietly, calmly. I lifted my chair and slid out of the room, heart hammering, but head clear. I touched the wine-stained collar, a map of territory I'd never claimed, and exhaled. Outside, the evening was soft, almost forgiving. I texted my friend Mara, who called immediately. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I think so," I said. "They turned it into a contract." The night whispered around me. For the first time, I felt the faint tremor of possibility, that the story didn't have to end the way it always had, that I could, finally, choose. Foreshadowing rippled beneath the calm. The parents wouldn't relent, Sophie wouldn't forgive, and the tests of loyalty had only just begun. The morning after the dinner, my phone was a battlefield. 36 missed calls, 54 texts, and an email titled Urgent Family blinked at me like an accusation. Mom, Dad, Sophie, they all wanted a piece of me, demanded compliance, demanded explanation. I set the phone face down, made tea, and let the silence do its work. It was then that the car pulled up. A man in a crisp blazer stepped out, briefcase in hand, moving with a precision that only comes from doing the same thing 100 times before. "Hi," he said, stopping at my gate. "Are you Lucy Wright?" "Yes," I replied cautiously. "I'm Ben, notary." His tone was neutral, professional, calm, observant. He didn't flinch at the wine stain on my collar from last night, at the chaos behind the front door. He glanced at the briefcase as though it contained more than ink and paper. It contained authority. "They hired you for clarity?" I asked. "Your mother," he said simply. "It's a family document." I exhaled and nodded. "Go ahead," I said, gesturing toward the house. "I'm leaving." Ben gave me a small nod, understanding the quiet defiance in my words. Even he, trained in neutrality, seemed to sense that this was not a standard notarization. Inside, the family had regrouped. Sophie dabbed at the tablecloth, trembling, as though the world had just shifted under her feet. Dad's jaw tightened, ready to bargain, to manipulate. Mom's smile was brittle, holding back rage and disbelief. Ben placed his briefcase down and opened it carefully. The stamp gleamed, a symbol of authority I hadn't felt in years. "I cannot notarize under duress," he said. His eyes met mine. "Everyone must consent. Do you?" "I do not," I said, calm, deliberate. My voice sounded alien to me, yet freeing. "Not today, not ever." Sophie's hands tightened around her towel. "This is unfair," she hissed. "You're abusing us." "I'm not," I said, steady. "I'm choosing myself." Ben closed his briefcase. "I'll send an invoice for my time," he said, and turned toward the door. Mom sagged in her chair. Dad's face burned red, sharp. "You're throwing away your family," he spat. I held my gaze. "No, I'm throwing away a bill." Sophie's gasp was sharp, primal. Rage and disbelief mingled in her eyes. "You would do this to my girls?" Lola and June, 6 years old, perfect little humans, and yet they had become weapons in a war I never agreed to fight. I wanted to tell her, "I am not doing this to them. You made this choice. Public school is not a tragedy." But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I turned, slid my keys from the console table into my pocket, and walked out. The front porch held a strange kind of serenity. The night air was soft, almost forgiving, and I sat on the top step, letting it wash over me. I texted Charles, my boyfriend, my anchor through chaos. They made me sign a contract. I said no. Within moments, his reply came. "Lucy, are you okay?" "I think so," I typed. "I'm finally choosing me." He called immediately. That's huge," he said, voice low and full of awe. "Do you need me to come over?" "No," I said. "I just need to breathe." The confrontation with my parents had been only the beginning. Their manipulations ran deep. Moral obligation, guilt, even my mental health from years ago was weaponized against me. But for the first time, I felt the tiniest crack in their control. The seed of freedom. Even as Ben walked away, the evening left an impression on me. Control is seductive, but consent is inviolable. Love should not be taxed. Duty should not be weaponized. And for the first time, I realized that my agency mattered more than anyone's idea of family obligation. This was the moment I had been waiting for without knowing it. A chance to redraw boundaries, to refuse being a ledger for a life I did not choose. Foreshadowing lingered like a shadow. Sophie would not let this go quietly. Mom would escalate, and Dad would find a new way to test my limits. But for now, the calm was mine, and for once, it was enough. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, a fresh cup of tea steaming beside me. The silence was deliberate, a shield against the storm I knew was coming. My phone buzzed relentlessly. Texts, calls, emails. each one a reminder that my refusal had ignited a small, furious fire. I began the purge. Auto payments to Sophie's household were canceled. Subscription services tied to family needs vanished with a tap. The invisible financial lifelines I had maintained for years were severed, and with each one, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I felt my back straighten. My head felt clear, but the backlash was immediate. Mom's text came first, veiled in the language of love. Think of Lola and June. You owe them a future. Sophie escalated quickly. You promised you'd always be there for us. How could you be so cold? I read, deleted, paused, and typed slowly. I am there, just not as a bank. Love does not equal debt. Charles called that afternoon. His voice was calm, steady. Lucy, they're relentless. You okay handling this alone? I am, I said. For once, I'm not running the numbers for someone else. I'm running them for me. But the storm wasn't just in messages. Sophie weaponized my past. Remember 2019, when you were struggling? Remember how I supported you? You owe me now. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Memories of therapy sessions, of depression, of quiet support were meant for healing, not leverage. I typed slowly. Weaponizing my mental health is a good way to get blocked. And I did. Blocked. Silence became my ally. Nate called that night, his voice low, almost confessional. They're on a warpath. Dad said, You're cutting off your nose despite your face. My nose is intact, I replied, chuckling softly, despite the tension. But let me ask you, Nate, how are you? Mixed, he admitted. I get it, Lucy. The number's crazy, but if you say yes out of fear, it's a lifetime payment. Exactly. That was it. The currency they traded in was fear. I'd been paying with it for decades. Then came the small doses of encouragement. Aunt Mary, the one relative who rarely intervened, sent a text. Proud of you, Lucy. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors you get to lock and unlock. Keep your keys. I printed it, taped it inside my pantry next to my budget binder, and felt a spark of clarity. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was strategizing. I was reclaiming space. Even work became therapeutic. My back stopped aching. Silence wasn't punishment anymore. It was choice. I walked loops around the park, jumped rope in the living room, and even added extra therapy sessions to talk about money, duty, and guilt. Each conversation with my therapist peeled back the years of indoctrinated obligation. Being needed isn't the same as being loved. Saying no doesn't make me cruel. And for the first time, I felt the faint pulse of freedom. The family tried again. Dad left a voicemail. We'll compromise. You pay the first year, and we'll figure out the second. I didn't call back. Mom escalated to lectures, shame dripping from each line. You will regret this when we are gone. We will not forget. I archived them. Each word a reminder, each sentence a challenge I refused to internalize. Sophie sent a final text from an unknown number. I'm sorry, I threw wine, but if you love the girls, you would try. I stared at the screen. My heart thumped, but I didn't reply. Apologies with hooks weren't apologies. They were chains. Through it all, one thing crystallized. My life, my choices, my boundaries, they mattered. Love was not a mandate. Duty was not a shackle. And I was finally learning how to be seen without being spent. Foreshadowing hung heavy. The parents weren't done. Sophie's anger simmered. Mom's manipulation would continue, and the war for compliance was far from over. But I had found something stronger than fear. I had found myself. 2 Sundays later, I didn't go to the family dinner. For the first time in years, I stayed home. The apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of my kettle and the soft glow of the evening sun across the hardwood floors. I chopped onions slowly, deliberately, letting the rhythm center me. At 6:45 p.m., the building buzzer rang. I ignored it. A folded piece of paper slid under the door. I picked it up, a copy of the Family Education Contribution Agreement, revised. My name was still printed under contributor, but a new clause had been added. Signing acknowledges moral obligation regardless of legal enforceability. I laughed. Alone in my kitchen, the sound echoing like a bell, I felt the weight of years lift slightly. I grabbed a pen, and with deliberate clarity, I wrote across the top in neat, unflinching letters, no. I folded it, slipped it into a big envelope, and mailed it back. Return to sender. The act was simple, yet monumental, a stone dropped after carrying it for 15 years. My shoulders relaxed, my chest expanded. For the first time, I felt the air in my life belonged to me. That night, I slept through without dreams of spreadsheets or ticking clocks. I woke the next morning to a series of notifications, but they were now just noise. I didn't respond. I didn't flinch. I had chosen. Charles called mid-morning. "Lucy, how are you feeling?" "I feel lighter," I admitted, "like I'm finally breathing in my own space." "You're incredible," he said softly. "You set a boundary, and it sticks. They can't take that from you." I smiled, the kind that comes from deep inside. No, they can't. Not this time. In the days that followed, the family tried everything. Guilt trips, revised proposals, even small, insidious reminders of past support. But I no longer responded. I no longer justified. I simply existed in my own terms. Love, I realized, was not currency. Obligation was not payment. Freedom was the truest inheritance. Sophie's texts slowed. Mom's letters stopped. Nate called occasionally, quietly supportive, and Aunt Mary's words echoed in my mind. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors you get to lock and unlock. Keep your keys. I had kept my keys. The evening sun streamed through my apartment windows. I poured a cup of tea, sat in my favorite chair, and let the silence fill me. For the first time in years, it was not the absence of family that pressed on me, but the presence of myself. I had faced the storm, refused to be coerced, and walked away from expectations that had never truly been mine. And in that quiet, I understood something essential. Sometimes the hardest thing in the world is to say no to love that demands a price you're not willing to pay. And sometimes saying no is the truest form of love there is.